This is a new episode of The Gold Standard, and if you're watching us on the streaming channel, I know a lot of people listen to this on the podcast, you're going to see three of us. But if you're doing the podcast, let's introduce the voices. I'm Joe Daneman. You are?
Hey, I'm Jeremy Rao.
So Jeremy's joining the show, and of course, Charlie Goldsmith.
I don't do voices, but that was good.
That's lower, baby. That's the deepest I can go with my voice. Usually I live somewhere up here, but it's good to be here.
This is the first time we've done three people on the Gold Standard, so you know it's a big week. If you're listening to this or watching this, we'll give you the update of where we are because I know everybody doesn't listen to it right when we record it. The Reds have just finished the first half of their series against the Marlins. So they have 2 games left in that series and then the 3 games left against the Rockies. And things seem down right now, Charlie. They came off the high of what they did in June. They went to Boston. They lost that series. They lost the series against Philadelphia, although they were very competitive. But what they've done against the Marlins, how would you describe where the team is right now, the final week before the All-Star break?
Well, there's always a side of it where you say it's just baseball. And kind of the irony of this down stretch is it started with, all right, Monday at Fenway Park. I thought that was Burns was terrible, but everything else was solid. On Tuesday at Fenway, they played a nice overall game. Saturday, a game they lost in Philadelphia. They kind of outplayed the Phillies and got some bad luck. And then Sunday, they got Zach Wheelered. So you could kind of talk yourself through that week. But then when you lose that margin for error because you dropped those games, and then you play 2 of your worst games of the season consecutively, coming off a bad week, games you have to win, that makes it a little more dire.
Too big of a chunk of this season, Charlie, has been those games where it's 2 runs or less. These 1-run games. You think about it as we talk right now, they've gone through this stretch of 4 games scoring 5 total runs. What is it about this team this year that they have struggled to score on the whole? I'm sure you know the numbers, but it's been a lot of games where they've had 2 runs or less.
A theme I keep hearing about, and I've heard it on different ends of the spectrum all season, is the balance between passiveness and aggression. You know, one of the moments where you need to be extra selective from a pitch perspective, develop a game plan to try to knock the starter out of a game, versus when it's time you get a bad pitch and you just got to turn on it right away. Balancing that out as they figure out what this offensive identity wants to look like has been, again, the theme I've consistently been hearing about since the first week of the season. And on days where that balance just isn't there, you see that reflected, I think, in the team approach.
So we've done this thermometer ever since we started the podcast of what Charlie is projecting as the Reds' ceiling of number of wins. Before we do the thermometer, I need 30 seconds here to unload an opinion.
Oh, let's go.
Because I don't know when this became a thing, and I think we all understand that when you try to judge a fan base and you try to take the temperature of a fan base, you can't just live on social media, right? Because a lot of times social media will skew what the actual whole fan base is thinking. But it feels too much like to me, and maybe you guys are noticing this, that people are living and dying on daily results with this team way too much.
Yeah.
That it has to be a bigger picture. That when they went through the stretch where they played great against the Yankees and they played great against the Padres, everybody thought this team, okay, they're in it. They're going to make a run for the playoffs.
Right.
Then they lose the series in Boston. Then they lose the series in Philadelphia. Tough places to play. I believe good teams. Obviously, Philadelphia is. And then they lose the 2 games of the Marlins, and everybody thinks season's over because I think it's a little bit of PTSD with this fan base. They've seen this happen too many times in recent seasons. I believe this team is going to go on another run. I believe the Reds are going to be in it in September. You can play this back and tell me I'm wrong in September. I'll gladly eat it. But I'll say this now about this. You can't look at baseball on a day-to-day results, bad week to bad week. You got to look at it with a bigger picture. Okay, now saying that, I don't know if you agree with that. Where's your thermometer for the Reds and their ceiling?
Real quick, because I have a real caveat based on what you said, and I agree with it 100%. The one thing is this is such a determinative window for how the Reds are going to approach the trade deadline, how the Reds view the 2025 season, their willingness to be aggressive to get a rental bat. All of these things factor into play with this stretch in July that could shape a lot of that strategy. So there are maybe a little bit more of an emphasis on the impact down the road that this stretch of games could make during the month of July, because are they in for 25, 26, or just still looking at the long term? it's time for them to really figure that out. They have to plant that flag down now, even though they've been more passive about that earlier. Now kind of is the decision-making point with that. I still see the same ceiling with this year's team. I think I've said this is a team that could win 90 games, but it's also a team that you'd like to see level up against the strongest competition on their schedule, which maybe, they definitely did against the Yankees and Padres, but didn't do well enough in Philadelphia, and then played down to the level of competition in Miami. So you're seeing a team that's still kind of riding the waves, riding a bit of a roller coaster. So they could win 90. I think now I'd be like 86, 87, maybe 88 as a high-end range of possibilities. But they've also got to figure out, too, at the deadline, what they want this year to be.
So, yeah, to bounce off both your points, I've kind of been I've been finding spots for vindication this season of when I said that Terry Francona, the plus minus, what he brings is maybe plus 8 to 10 wins for this team. And I've gone back and said that's probably too much. But I will say recently, when the Reds were 4 games over 500, I went back to the exact number from last year, amount of games. I think it was 88 games at the time. They were 4 games under 500, 4 games over 500, the exact, so it's plus 8, right? So it's one of those things where I'm trying to find these little stopping points along the way, little meters along the way in the season to say, are they better than last year? Are they trending in the right direction? I think the big thing that I would say, and this is a question and somewhat opinion as well for both of you, is that it seems like the mark of a Terry Francona team is that they're never truly out of it. At least it feels this way this season to me, because we've written the eulogy so many times. Fans on social media have, for sure, right? Like you saw it all over social media on Monday and Tuesday, and the trend of this team, and man, it's over, but then they bounce right back again and get going well again. And so I think I agree with your point that we can't be in this moment, this day-to-day moment of the season's over. It feels like this team, or maybe Terry Francona's handprints on this team, tell all of us that we should wait and see what happens.
Because I think 10 or 12 nights, inevitably, no matter what team you are, you're going to show up to the ballpark. You're not going to have it. The other team's going to outplay you.
Yeah.
That's going to happen to the New York Yankees. It's going to happen to whatever team, the Cincinnati Reds, right there in kind of the middle tier of Major League Baseball. There are going to be nights you just show up, you don't have it. And that's happened to the Reds, and I think it happened to the Reds in Game 2 against the Marlins. Now, I go back to Monday night where there was no energy, and you put those 2 games together, and I can understand the frustration of the fan base. But I'll lob this back to you because we're going to talk about the trade deadline here. I don't think... And I wonder how the front office feels about this, how ownership feels about this. When you look at this trade deadline, and you mentioned it, trying to figure out what you want to be. Do you want to be a buyer? Do you want to be a seller? When you're in it, and the Reds right now are in it, their heads above water, right? Can you tell the fan base, we're not at least going to go for it for this year? Can you say, we're going to push it to 2026? And when you talk trade deadline, they've done that before. The Scott Rowland trade. Reds fans remember that. That was a trade for the next year. I do think there has to be just a bit of a PR brain somewhere in that room that tells them, hey guys, this fan base, we've been doing this to them now for several years. We have to at least do something to give ourselves a chance at the second half of the season.
So, the Reds have, I think they took that approach very specifically last year when, for example, the Royals called about Jonathan India, and Nick Krall said Jonathan India is not available, even though Jonathan, we all knew, didn't have a long-term future with the Reds team that was going to get Matt McClain back. He was their starting second baseman. He was one of their more reliable hitters. Not one of their best players, but he still had a role. And they said, Kansas City, we'll talk to you in the offseason. That's what ended up happening. I don't see a scenario at all where this becomes a total sell-off punt on the season, but there's still a wide range of possibilities in terms of, especially when you look at the possibility for a lockout in 2027. Does 2026 have to be the year? Do you look at it as a 2-year window between 25 and 26 and try to balance out resources for that 2-year stretch? Or continue what they've done and try to say, you know what, we're just going to try to stay young, we're going to try to stay balanced, stay sustainable, which is what they've done, but it might be time for a more bold move. I have been looking, I haven't found a Scott Rowland type who I think's on the market.
Let me get 2 names here because there have been 2 names that have hit Twitter for Reds fans recently. Let's start with the big one, Eugenio Suarez. Reds fans have been talking about this guy. We know him so well here in Cincinnati. That's right, good vibes only. He's having a great year. He's got 26 home runs as we record this podcast. He doesn't have a huge contract, but the contract winds up at the end of the season. So it would be a rental. I said this to you, I'll say it to Jeremy, and I'll tell everybody listening to this. Would you be against a Noelvi Marte and Christian Encarnacion Strand to get Eugenio Suarez for 2 months? I'm
going to start with an answer that people aren't going to like. I'm just the messenger here. Eugenio Suarez's salary is still a factor here too. Like, there are still payroll questions that this team has to address and figure out what really, comes down to an ownership level, what they're willing to continue to further invest in this year's team. Like, for example, when they traded Alexis Diaz, they said, well, you open up a couple $1 million. That's the margins they've been living with. So for me, that impacts these types of conversations as well. It's not necessarily cut and dry. Now, to answer your question more specifically, Noelvi Marte and Christian Encarnacion Strand for Eugenio Suarez, that's the type of package it would probably have to take, because the Diamondbacks want to stay competitive. They're right in it with the Reds. The Diamondbacks also are going to be able to call up the Cubs and the Yankees, who need third baseman even more than Cincinnati, and drive up the price there. I probably would not make that move. I'm planting my flag in. I still do think Marte is going to have a nice second half to the season. That's just what I believe. But that package is intriguing and is a fun conversation.
The other one is, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, Byron Buxton. So it's been Suarez and Buxton that Reds fans have been talking about. Right-handed bats that can give this team the kind of pop they need. Is Byron Buxton a viable option for the Reds at the trade deadline?
Byron Buxton to me would be a no. The Reds need someone like Byron Buxton, but because of their, again, limited resources, this is just how it is. You only get so many shots. Like, the 2020 Reds only got one shot with the Trevor Bauer deal. The 2012 Reds got one shot with the Matt Latos deal. You only get one shot, and to take that shot on a player who might be one of the most talented guys in the league, but is also one of the most injury-prone guys in the league, for me, that's too much risk, because the Twins will be asking for all-star starter type prices for Buxton, but I just can't get there just because of the injury stuff.
So I have some questions about the Bengals I want to get to, but I know you have more Reds questions. Why don't you dive into that first?
So I'm going to pop up the schedule here.
Yeah.
The Reds schedule to start the second half. We know what it is here the rest of the first half. And it wouldn't surprise anybody if we woke up this time next week, the day after the All-Star game, and said, wow, the Reds finished the first half on a 5-game winning streak.
Sure.
Because they have Andrew Abbott, as of this recording, Andrew Abbott on the mound tonight, and the Colorado Rockies coming to town this weekend. So there's a chance the Reds could be in actually pretty okay position to start the second half. But man, look at the second half, right? The Mets are good, the Rays are good, the Dodgers are obviously excellent. The Braves are having a terrible season, just a terrible season I cannot figure out. But they're very talented, and then there's the Cubs. So we talked about June being this gauntlet. Oh, man, it's going to make or break the Red season. The Reds showed me in June that they can play with some of the better teams in Major League Baseball. So that's what's coming up in the second half. I will say one last thing about the Reds, and I mentioned the name. I'll say it one more time. I still believe Noelvi Marte is their most movable piece because he feels expendable to the rest of the young core, and also he feels like right now he's more of a potential over production guy. And what that gets them, I don't know. Maybe it gets him a bullpen arm. He's the one name I'll be watching most as the trade deadline approaches. Now Bengals.
So let's talk about the Bengals. And, it's funny. I've been having car issues lately with one of my cars, which has been fun, right?
Sorry.
Took it to one shop, and they were like, we can't fix it. Take it to this other shop. So I took it there. So I had 2 stops at car shops yesterday. And at both of those places, I'm on my way out after getting the car checked in. And wait a minute. Any inside Bengals info was the question I got literally right before I got out the door at both places. And it wasn't about anything outside of, it was specifically about Shemar Stewart and Trey Hendrickson. I cannot move a muscle right now in this city without someone asking me what's going to happen with these guys. Training camp is coming now within 2 weeks, and we're still wondering what happens. So, Charlie, I'll start with this. Shemar Stewart, I feel like deadlines make deals. I understand that the first day of camp is not a true deadline for Shemar Stewart. However, being a first-round pick, being a rookie, he's got to get on the field. I feel like that it's going to happen somehow, some way by day 1 of camp with Shemar. What do you think?
The difference between Shemar and obviously Trey Hendrickson is I don't think there's a huge delineation between the pure ability to make an impact this season of Shemar Stewart, of Miles Murphy, and of Joseph Osai right now with where they each stand heading into the season. One of those guys could end up being a true number 2 defensive end. One of them could become a true rotational 4th piece we don't see a lot of. who it's going to be, I don't know. I think there's a lot of, again, interchangeability there that'll work itself out. So Stewart's got to compete. Stewart's got a lot to earn.
Right.
Stewart's got a lot to prove, or else, I mean, they like Cam Sample too. There's a world where Stewart has a bad camp and isn't active week one. Like that's a possibility that exists, that has existed with other first-round rookies at defensive end around the league in the NFL. I think it is very important for Shemar to get on the field. I think that probably takes away from a bit of his leverage compared to Hendrickson, who knows exactly where he slides in to this defense.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
So as we do this podcast, we are 2 weeks away from training camp starting. So this is becoming to the point of, I don't know what the word is, critical for the Bengals to get this figured out with Trey Hendrickson, because we saw what happened last year with Jamar Chase, and Jamar was different. Jamar will always be different than Trey Hendrickson because of his celebrity. He's not just a football player. He's not just a star. He's a celebrity in Cincinnati. So everybody wanted to know what he was doing on a daily basis, even when he wasn't practicing. What's he wearing? What's the body language like? I don't think it'll be like that with Trey Hendrickson if Trey Hendrickson isn't signed or his deal is taken care of before we get to training camp. But do you think this will become any kind of a side act, any kind of a distraction that will take away from what the Bengals are doing, and that's trying to play really well at training camp so they play really well when they start the season like they haven't in years past?
I think the distraction's already happened, which is the expectation that the Bengals in these contract situations and holdups are just going to snowball in a way that makes players feel uncomfortable. Like, I think that is something that has a real ripple effect when you look at the short and long-term future of the Bengals. And I think that distraction, again, has already impacted maybe how people around the league feel about the team. Has it impacted how some of the young guys feel about the team? Only time will tell, but that, you're already down that path. So now the further down you go, the harder it is to get back, certainly. But I think the big distraction's already happened. And even if Trey and even Stewart show up the first day of camp and they're ready to go and they're ready to play, their presence will still be a distraction because they've made these situations a distraction. Are they ready to hit the ground running in camp? Are they in shape and ready to go? Do they know the defense? Like, even in a best case scenario, all of those questions still exist.
So Jeremy Fowler of ESPN recently posted an article of important voices, exec kind of people around the NFL, ranking edge rushers in the NFL. And Trey does make the top 10. He does not make the top 5. He came in at 6th, right behind Nick Bosa. Myles Garrett is up there at the top, obviously. TJ Watt's in there in the top 5. Do you think that's a fair spot for Trey? Number 6, I have a feeling I know what you're going to say on this, but is that a fair spot for Trey?
I think if Aiden Hutchinson didn't get hurt last year, he'd be ahead of Trey.
And Aiden is behind him, yeah, that's right.
Will Anderson was carrying that, and he's got a great edge. Daniel Hunter playing alongside of him as well. Carrying that identity of the defense with the playmaking as well. Like, Will Anderson broke Justin Herbert in the playoffs, and impacted winning in that way consistently all season against the run and the pass. And I'm forgetting the names further down the list. But those are just two more. You can make the case certainly impacted winning more than Trey Hendrickson did in 2020. To me, that's just a part of it, and a part of why Hendrickson, the move isn't give him a long-term deal.
And it hasn't, and to follow up on that, it feels like that this hasn't been a slam dunk for the Bengals because they have access to the All-22.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I know you said that, but it's like fans are wondering, look at the numbers. How have you not done this yet? And then you've broken it down plenty of times. It's when he's winning against elite tackles, when he's winning on third down and important moments of games. Those moments weren't as much last season. I think that's maybe what the Bengals see as well here.
I've said this before too, and I think it's just important to keep hammering this home. This is the crux to the whole thing. Trey Hendrickson got the opportunity to see what his value was around the league when the Bengals gave him permission to seek a trade. And I don't think the news that Hendrickson got was, you are as valuable as you think you are.
Yeah.
I think that is also something that's going to lead Trey back to Cincinnati to play this season, because I think that's just how the league sees him.
Now the gold standard, this is when we ask rapid-fire questions to Charlie.
Ooh, the gold rush, yeah.
Jeremy has a couple. I'll let Jeremy start here. I do have one actual Bengals footballish discussion I want to get into with all of us to end the gold rush. But you've got a couple of fun ones to start us off.
Okay, yeah, I have a couple of ones that are a little more, I guess, specific to the teams, but I'll start with the weird one. Have you seen the golf video where this guy loses his mind? Photog Austin Brisky showed me this. You showed it to Austin, I believe. This guy loses his mind on someone in front of him playing really slow. Well, the problem is the guy that's playing really slow pushes back in rage think they're Canadian. They sound Canadian.
Very much Canadian.
Anyways, so the guy who's playing slow pushes back in rage. The guy behind him is much bigger and eventually grabs him and throws him into the water. And they just get after it. The guy playing slow loses. My question is, and this is not very rapid, I apologize, is there something in life, Charlie, that would anger you enough to throw someone into a pond? And if so, what would it be?
No, I've said this before. I've always wanted to get into one fist fight. Like, that's the over-under for me. I don't want to be in two fist. I'd like to have one in my life.
We can arrange that.
But it would have to be such a perfect situation. Now, like, I mean, I'll make this about work. Like, what upsets me the most is when something gets taken out of context and then posted by another account as a tweet from what you did. You know what I mean?
Tough.
Like, oh, this guy, his ankle hurts. Oh, but really what it was the ankle's getting checked, but it gets redistributed.
Yeah.
That irks me, not enough to throw someone into a pond. I bet there are other life things I could think of as well, but that to me would be the best one.
What?
I would love to see Charlie throwing an aggregator into the Ohio River, like from high atop Great American Ballpark, because he took his tweet and took it out of context.
I'm just wondering, like, I mean, there's got to be something. You know, you're saying that would make you mad. Like, I would just love to see you going head-to-head with someone and just grabbing them and launching them into the Ohio River. That would be awesome. Right outside of Bengals practice.
Let's make it happen.
You've had enough. That's what I want to see.
By the way, the video looked like me trying to fight Andrew Whitworth.
Oh, the guy who
Don't
eventually
fight someone that much bigger than you.
he's massive. He looks like a 6'6" lineman.
And he's yelling bang every time he hits.
Bang. I mean, he's Mike Breening him.
Yes, somebody needs to put Mike Breen's bangs into that clip. Okay, your next one.
My next one is about Jose Trevino.
Yep.
Okay. He threw a ball 31.8 miles per hour, right?
Yep.
Which is incredibly slow. So the first one is, how fast do you think you could throw a baseball?
Probably 60, 65. So, like, arm strength, I pitched one game. I couldn't throw a strike. Never pitched me again. Arm strength was my biggest attribute on the field. There was a beautiful play I made once in center field when I was 13 where I threw a runner out of the plate. I played a lot of third base as well.
He has it written down in a journal at home.
But the motion of pitching just was never what was conducive to my arm strength.
Okay.
I think I could get 60 to 65, but in the field, the arm strength played well.
Okay.
Very Charlie of me. When I was playing Little League Baseball, I used to keep, it wasn't a spreadsheet because those didn't exist.
Yep.
I had a piece of paper, a ruler, and I made my own box score for the season, keeping track of hits, runs, RBI. Pretty much any time I got on base, I gave myself a hit, even if it was E5.
Yep.
It was a hit for Daneman. I think I hit like 660 that year, even though I probably hit like 200.
I have stats for every single youth league I played in. Every, like, basketball, baseball, soccer. You can go back through my old Trapper Keeper.
Yeah.
That's laying around.
But kids got Game Changer now to keep track of all that stuff digitally, man.
Back
They're
in
so
the day.
lucky. By the way, what's the fastest you think you could pitch? You pitched in high school baseball.
Oh, wow.
I think, I mean, look, I'm nearing 40 here. I think I could probably still gas it up to mid-70s, hopefully around
Hey.
Wow.
I think so. The weirdest thing is, like, for all the things that have changed in my life, I can still throw a ball pretty hard. I don't know why. So that's still there. I feel somewhat confident in that, although for a major leaguer, that's a changeup at best. So, yeah, whatever.
I saw this guy stand at home plate in Iowa at the Field of Dreams and launch a baseball into the corn. You're allowed to do that. They encourage you to do it, so it's not like he broke any rules.
for you.
But he wanted to prove that he still had the arm. By the way, Trevino was throwing in the mid-50s, and that looks ridiculous, like it has this loop to it.
Yeah.
I can't even throw 50, so I can't imagine what I would look like.
31.8 is insane.
What was an Ephus pitch?
But no doubt, like, I can't imagine trying to hit that.
I also want to find the pitcher that can master that and throw off hitters so much.
Yep.
Because it worked.
You Darvish.
Yu Darvish, you're right. Yu Darvish has crazy stuff. Any more for the Gold Rush before I go with mine?
Go ahead.
My Gold Rush is this, and this is quick. How would you power rank the most important defensive players on the Bengals this year? If you take Trey Hendrickson out, look, he's the best player, right? We're going to training camp. Let's power rank. Each pick one player we say has to hit a different level for this team to be better defensively this year. I'll go first. Cam Taylor-Britt has to be Cam Taylor-Britt good. It can't be Cam Taylor-Britt bad. Because I still have questions about this team at that position. There are questions all over defense. I think Cam Taylor-Britt is number one on my list of players that have to be good in 2025 for the Bengals to be good.
What do you got? Go ahead.
I think they need more from B.J. Hill. I think they've they've planted or they've put their eggs in the B.J. Hill basket.
Yeah.
From an interior pass rush perspective, from a leadership of the defensive line perspective, from being kind of the glue that holds the whole unit together. Not the flashiest player, but one of the most critical.
Oh, man. I feel like this is kind of obvious. I feel like Geno Stone is in there. I mean, I struggle with it because I don't fully believe, I'm struggling to convince myself that he can be that. However, he's way up there in the rankings because he needs to be that. And he needs to prove people like me wrong, quite frankly. So I think he's way up there.
Now the Gold Nugget. This is when we dive into the notebook of Charlie Goldsmith, all of his reporting on the Reds and the Bengals. You can see all of his writing right now on fox19now.com/sports. There's a tab for Charlie's chalkboard. We finish every show with the Gold Nugget. I want to ask you about your conversation with Derek Johnson. There's so much talk about the Reds' rotation. It'll be talked about even more as we get close to the trade deadline. What was your big takeaway from your discussion with the Reds pitching coach?
Well, the Reds are going to be very careful managing Chase Burns' innings during the second half of the season, very understandably so, very similar to what the Pirates did with Paul Skeens. But that's not going to be the case this week. Chase Burns will pitch on Friday against the Rockies. He'll do something Skeens never did last season, which is pitch on 4 days rest in the big leagues. Now, what happens when Carson Spires comes back, when Hunter Green hopefully comes back in the near future for them? There's talk about a 6-man rotation. There's talk of kind of a piggyback system with a 5-man rotation where Martinez basically pitches a starter's role out of the bullpen on specific days based off game situations. There is even a scenario where Chase Burns goes to the bullpen down the stretch at some point this season. So many moving pieces and decisions they'll have to make.
Trade deadline. Last one for you, Jeremy. Would you move a Red starter? And it's not even just looking for this year, because you can build like the Reds did with the Scott Rowland trade several years back, and you can push towards next year.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the Reds have enough depth in the rotation that one of these guys could be expendable?
I do think I would move a Red starter, and I think it's difficult. Obviously, Nick Lodolo is one of those carrots you could dangle, I think. Nick Martinez, we understand the money that he's making. That's a tough one. That's a really tough one. I sometimes wonder what it is. What is Nick Martinez going to be any given day? I understand some days are bad luck. Brady Singer's also in that bucket for me. I think any one of those three. Nick Martinez, I don't think that actually would happen. I'm curious to see if Singer or Lodolo could be an option.
You've had a hard line no.
Well, the one scenario where I would consider trading Martinez is if the payroll coming from ownership with what they're giving the front office is in such a strict spot that they would have to trade Martinez to open up space for Suarez. You can't roll stuff like that out. But because of how they're managing Burns, I'm only counting him, and he's a great pitcher. But right now, in terms of the innings he'll be able to provide, he's like half a starter right now. So they have 4.5 starters right now with Spires coming back. But then if you rip out a Nick Lodolo, well, now you have 4.5 starters, and Brian Van Bell's joining you. You got anything on Brian Van Bell?
I've got nothing on Brian Van Bell, but thank you for asking me. No, I think your point stands, and that's why I kind of hesitate to answer it, because I feel like they need that depth, because you see what can happen. You're a little bit leery of what's going to happen with Hunter Green, Chase Burns. There's still question marks that loom, and you might need Nick Martinez still in the rotation. You might need those other guys that I mentioned as well to come up big for you late in the season. And they are somewhat reliable. It's just at times you're wondering what the heck is happening here.
You can read Charlie Goldsmith's work every day on fox19.com/sports. Right there on Charlie's chalkboard, you can watch or listen to The Gold Standard every week on all of Fox 19 Now's streaming platforms and anywhere you get your podcast. For Charlie Goldsmith and Jeremy Rao, I'm Joe Danneman. We'll talk to you next week on another edition of The Gold Standard.